I'm so excited about this one because everybody is very confident and calm, at least on the surface. Let's start with introductions. Quickly, if I ask you to, the introduction, I would like to go this way because otherwise it's going to be too long. We're talking about artificial intelligence. What's interesting about your background that led you to this point? We're parents as well. We'll skip that.
Buckets.
Let's start with you, Martin.
Sure. I listened to the New York Times AI podcast the start of this year, Hard Fork, and they were talking about Claude Code, and I thought, I've tried it a few times, and the coding is terrible. And they had a challenge, and they said to folks, you have to tell us about your Claude Code project that you've done with the one proviso that you haven't coded before. And it was amazing what people came up with. So I decided to go back, and I was instantly hooked. And you could prompt for a game, and it would spit it out in 20 minutes, and with minimal corrections, you'd have a viable something. Yes. I mean, not to ship, but for yourself. So that's the most recent thing. I'm Martin Bekker. I lecture at Wits University. I'm at Electrical and Information Engineering. I'm also a fellow of the Mind Institute, where we work on various forms of intelligence, animal, human, and machine intelligence. And I've got a PhD in working on machine learning and what we call computational social science, so predicting human actions, behaviors using ML.
It's a mouthful. It's already way above my pay grade.
It just sounds impressive, doesn't it?
Carien, again, for the people who haven't met you.
My name is Carien. I'm a psychologist. And I think in this conversation, I represent the man on the street that thinks ChatGPT is the best thing since popcorn. So,
Awesome. It's valuable.
Rhys Blackbeard, co-founder and business director of Blackbeard Technologies. I think, what makes interesting my background and how kind of Blackbeard Technologies was formed is my brother's far, far smarter than me. And we kind of had no interests. We say, like, I was the sportsman, the jock, and my brother, was a piano player and all of that. But the one thing we bonded on was tech. We were drilling holes in the wall between our bedrooms to put the network cable in. And we've always just, it's been a hobby, if I can say it. My brother went in professional, but for hobby, I spent 16 years at South African breweries. And when he showed me, he's along the way been showing me. So when ChatGPT came out, I tried to do a budget with it. I sat till 3 in the morning and eventually just did it myself. This is probably 22, 23. And then, I had this idea around a solar app because you have to, you've got the solar that's being wasted, but your pool's not on, or your heater's, thing. And it's really always had this idea. And my brother said to me, no, it's 22 engineers, 3 months. I'm not putting that kind of capital into something. And then, end of last year, we were discussing.
So your most recent job was still at AB in Bev?
Yeah, I've only been on my own since the 1st of April.
Yeah.
And I went very quickly through that, but it was logistics. It's hard. It's grit. Which is a lot of comes and things that teach you well for no matter what you do. But it was always, having these ideas or whatever. And then Claude Code, my brother put it on my computer on the 23rd of December. And within 45 days, we had a prototype, and I'd coded. I'm definitely not an engineer or a coder. A lot of the thinking of how it should work and how it should integrate and how, when the solar hit this level, turn this on, when this happens, whatever. And I've decided, the most things you regret in life are the things you don't do, not the things you do. And I said, well, if I don't try now, at 38, kind of can fail at this and maybe still go back into corporate. And Amazon actually asked me the other day if I'm interested, and I was like, man, if you come to me so many times, but I really want to try and see if this will work. And just to come back to the question, I think the interest is that it was always a hobby with me and my brother, the way me and my brother connected. He's still working full-time. And his whole thing is he works for a company that looks at camera images, it describes the image and looks at all the rail networks.
He's in the UK, no?
He's in the UK, yeah. But they have cameras across Europe and stuff. we have this flippant, not to use the word, but
Flippin' amazing.
that LLMs are these amazing things, but also these confidently wrong again, So I think my background was like tech was a hobby, and now it's become a career. And I went, I did a 6-month MIT course where I like to say that it's as technically deep as I'd go, but I won the hackathon at the end, and I can't code, and that is the power of it, is that if you can conceptually understand, you no longer need to deeply technically understand, but you do need someone technically understanding it because there's so much going on that you can go down the complete wrong path, and then the LLM will just keep telling you, you're on the right track.
So the reason I've got this mix of people, and again, Martin, thank you for the short notice. I sent him a voice note, and I never do a voice. I don't like voice notes, and I sent him a 4-minute voice note. It sounds like my mother. Anyway, so busy reading a book, and the guy explains it very nice. I like visual examples, and he said, imagine you got 3 or 4 blind people or blindfolded people to stand around, and they start touching. And this guy says, well, this is hard and smooth, and this guy says it's hard and hairy. They're all standing around an elephant explaining the same thing, and that's what I'm hoping from this conversation. So your background, it's high level education, or at least academics. Yours is the human part of it, which is becoming a bigger and bigger part of it. Yours is actually doing it in customers, and I think there's very few people who can say they've actually implemented AI at more than one use case. He's done that the last few months. And I'd love us to talk to AI, but like we said before the recording started, not in a fresh new way, but not in the fear-mongering YouTube stuff that we get all the time. We've got South African businesses, mostly South African businesses, business owners, executives who listen to this, and my partner who's in Israel said the other day, I think their conversion rate in Tel Aviv at the moment on actually quoting AI projects to actually pushing signed deals into production is like 3%. So everybody is thinking it, wanting to do it, but the actual numbers tell you very few companies are actually implementing it, especially in externally facing, customer facing stuff. So Carien, the specific point I wanted to bring in, like I said, is it feels like there's a you guys need to help me with my words. Being known as a human, psychologically, spiritually, whichever way you want to put it, and knowing, like data knowing. And it seems like they're dovetailing. And the typical user out there, the typical person out there is struggling to see the difference between the machine and what they perceive to be a human in the machine, or some form of thing that can actually know them. Can you maybe start with that? What your thoughts are on that?
I think it's a very human need to be known or understood, or at the very least listened to. And I think one of the fun things on like surface level, we're not even talking businesses, but just a random guy in his bedroom trying to use AI, it's immediately available. It'll respond immediately. It remembers some things that you've told it before. It brings that in, which makes you feel like, whoa, somebody's actually listening and everything I've said is important. It validates you, which I think is a tricky thing to talk about.
Remember to explain to us why, Martin, it validates us.
And I think what then also happens is you feel like what you are experiencing is not crazy. And that makes people feel very known. Mostly maybe because AI is not coming with its own blind spots and its own hurts and its own projections. It's just listening and using everything you gave it. Where if you have human interaction, people listen with their own filters and they react to it. And that can make you really scared because what if I say this and that makes you angry? Yeah. And I think people are really drawn to that kind of idea. But then I also think, I'm wondering if the turnover to actually using it is poor or small because we don't trust it yet. Like, you're not 100% sure. It feels really nice, but you almost want to go test the theories out there. So you hear what it's told you about whether you asked it what disease you have or how to answer your mother-in-law. But then you first go test it to see if it would be that way. People are like waiting to see, is this going to be a problem? So maybe there's a trust. We like being known. We like taking the shortcut that it maybe provides, but we also don't trust it yet.
Why, Martin, is there something in us that feels like we can't really trust it? And what about the makeup of what about what artificial intelligence is?
Sure, yeah.
Is that what?
Okay, well, let's go back to your elephant. Hopefully we can end with this idea. And then I think my bit is done because, I have zero entrepreneurial skills and zero risk appetite. And so there's your man. So Naranjan and Kapoor write a great book. And they say, imagine we have the word vehicle. And for a spaceship and a skateboard and a bicycle and a boat. And we just say vehicles. And somebody says, vehicles are the answer to pollution. And they mean, I don't know, bicycles in Amsterdam or something, and somebody else says vehicles are going to take us to Mars. And okay, so it won't work. And that's what we're doing with AI. We're talking about different things, and we use this term AI as the analogy or the equivalent of vehicle here. So step one, there's AI as in the broadest field of automated decision-making. All right, so something as banal as an if statement, if this, then that. If you add enough of them, you can have a search algorithm or a sort algorithm, and that, for a while, seems intelligent to us. So you've got this really broad field of all sorts of work. And then you've got a smaller circle there that we call machine learning. And with machine learning, or ML, that's pattern matching. So essentially three types of patterns that are out there. It's if I want to predict a number, if I want to predict a percentage, or if I want to predict a category, a class. So if I want to predict a number, maybe say a house price, I can have an algorithm and I give it lots of houses and the price. And for these houses, I say how many rooms and in what suburb it is and what amenities it has. And if I show it lots of examples, we call that training. And then at some stage, the training is done. And now I can give it unseen examples and say, predict the price for me. So that's the one way. For the percentage, well, the best example is on the right-hand side of your YouTube or whatever social media you use. It dishes up things that it thinks is more likely as a percentage of what you want to see. And then we could explain how that works. And then the classes, the categories, that's if I want to classify pictures of cats and dogs, right? I give it lots of pictures of cats, and I say this is a cat, and lots of pictures of dogs, and that's a cat, and at some stage the model knows. Now, a large language model is yet something else. So we've had AI, we've had a smaller circle, which is machine learning, and then we have a smaller circle, which is generative AI or large language models. There are some image generation and sort of diffusion models, but that works completely differently. And if I may, so how that works is we write an algorithm, we four, and we say we want to do two things. Algorithm, I'm going to show you all the text that ever has been texted, every journal article, every book, every Reddit post, everything from, the depths of 4chan, everything, every tweet, and you do two things. One, when you see a new idea, save that, and for every other idea, make a connection. And what we have is, if you think about a galaxy of stars, you have about 20,000 stars, and each of them is a concept or an idea. And you have a little spaceship, and that's taking a path from star to star, and that's a sentence. So I have a dream is just a path. And that's all it is. So when we're talking about AI, colloquially, we're talking about large language models, which is this subset here. Yeah. And essentially all it does, I mean, in an amazing way, but is a next word and a next sentence prediction model that sees if a spaceship goes from here to here to here, if I say the capital of France is, it doesn't look up. It doesn't know that it's Paris. It's just seen that that path is the most likely of all the other paths. So we say it's stochastic. In other words, it's a mathematical probability. Now, to your question about, so we want to be known and we want this thing to be human sounding, so we train it so that it has all the little verbal tics to make it sound like a human. So, it says, hello, how are you doing? And how are things this morning? We give it a sympathetic voice. I'm saying we as if I'm creating these things. But that's the idea behind it. But really the mechanics is just predicting a sequence of things, which means that there's a sort of a fundamental disconnect between what it knows, so to speak, and what it can present to you, right? It can present things in a way that we breathe life into it and we say, hey, it really understands me. And I've got some students that essentially have had kind of relationships, emotional relationships with GPT-4 and were very angry when it was replaced because there was a real friendship and it really got me. Yeah. And these are engineering students that understand transformer models and backpropagation and the mechanics, and they bought into it 100%. Sorry, that was a very long-winded explanation.
I think it's important because in your world, you're now actually sitting, you don't have to name customer names, but you've got South African businesses that you go into, execs. What's the conversation? What's happening there? Do you need to convince them, or are they scared? Are they excited and you just need to enable them?
I think the word we've spoken about is trust. And I think if there's one thing the machines and everything can't do, it's that human-to-human trust. Right? And it's one of the reasons why I was excited to come here, because a lot of things I'm learning is just watching Dario. And I think I trust Dario. I keep saying I hope he's not like the South African cricket team that, you get your high hopes and then crushes your heart and he becomes like another silicone billionaire. But this trust, and that's the first thing. So when I walk in, the first thing is no laptops, no technology. Let's just discuss who are you, who am I? Just bring it down to the people thing, because I think the technology and the engineering is, I won't even pretend, I did a little course in 6 months or 16 weeks to try and understand. I would never say I conceptually maybe understand, but I don't deeply understand. But what gave me success over so many years in business was people. Choosing the right person, understanding what the person's good at, when you can push the person, when you can't, etc. So the first thing I try and do is just who's in the room, so describing who I am, my background, and why I gave up, a very big corporate role, because I fundamentally believe this technology, I think my brother will go into something like this and we'll say 5% of the words, but it'll be half the AI summary, And he said that, AI, so everyone's saying it's going to change the world. I think it has the ability to change your world. So the thing is, when you go sit with the client, what is it that is their business pain point, Because when you walk in generally with a client, the first thing they can think of is they're like, I don't know, I pay Salesforce so much money and, I want to play Salesforce. Like, Salesforce was built over so many years, an operating system. And the first thing to do is just say, listen, the technology is amazing, but you need to bring the human on, and the human, like we had to learn how to use mobile phones, we had to learn. And so the first thing I try and do is just one, understand them, and then start with the simplest task that takes the most amount of time. Something like, I got 100 emails yesterday, which are the 3 that actually I should focus on? But starting to bring...
Assuming Copilot doesn't know.
Yeah, and let's not talk about Copilot, because I think it's my biggest adversary, but also my biggest selling point, because when you show them what Claude, if they've been using Copilot and they think that's what AI is, and then you show them Claude Code, which, gets into your computer, reads your files, but has that, for me, the big trust thing, that yes, there's a contract in place, we won't train on you, all of that kind of thing. But I really do, like I say, trust that Anthropic want to do the right things, You know, one part of the reasons why they left OpenAI, Dario and his sister, you know, not enough money in research, not enough money in safety. So that's that whole trust. And that's the first thing you ask and want to do with a client, is to form the trust, understand they obviously have these huge ambitions of what AI can do, and then saying, okay, but let's start with you, because you're not the software engineer or whatever, you know, that, or the thousands of software engineers that Salesforce or whatever has, but you can build things simply. And when you build the thing, you learn. And I think that's the first step, that when you get them, that, okay, it starts learning me and using techniques, again, backpropagation is to train the model. This is just training who you are, that every time you talk to it, you know, part of the onboarding I do is that just learn the person, but I make them aware of what it's doing. You know, I think, you know, when they say the product is free, you know, then the word is you are the product.
Yes.
You know, but like, even when I think about, obviously now you're trying to monetize and make money, it's almost like, okay, if I'll charge you X, but if you give me feedback, which is what these models need to know if it's working or not, I'll discount you, even if it's 100 Rand for the product, but I'm going to debit you and I'm going to credit you 100 Rand when you say, yes, I'll opt in, so that you understand the value. And that's another thing I'll give for free, is turn the training off, you know, rather pay the 400 Rand, which is what, like 4 cups of coffee, than have your RP, that is who you are, being trained by, whether it's the Chinese or the Americans. You know, that for me. So the first thing is just building the trust, and slowly start bringing in, you know, the value it can add in the increments that a human can take in terms of the learning. So you have clients who are like, you know, freaking whiz kids, and, you know, done stuff since they were at varsity, and, you know, and you have others who've been in, you know, like 60-year-old, you know, who's like hats off getting into this thing, but they learn at different rates, you know, and you can't give the same onboarding to a 60-year-old who's, you know, kind of been told you need to do this because the company's doing it, versus a CEO, entrepreneur who's, you know, flying, and is just so keen to like put this everywhere. You know, it's two different.
I was wondering, is it the first, I was wondering about this last night, you guys will probably know, is it the first technology that started out being commoditized? All other technologies and stuff come out very specialized, only available to a few, and then over time, it gets commoditized. It feels to me like this one's the other way around, like it's commoditized first, so the most people are using the free version. When I speak to customers, and they try and bring two worlds together. The one is my business and my customers and my systems and my security and my data and my products and my services. And the other one is this reality of this, all of a sudden it's this super commoditized, everybody is using it, tool. How do I bring that experience into my world? Is it even possible to expect of a business to offer their customers this commoditized version of it? Martin, I don't know if you want to.
So I think there are lots of examples of tech that comes out as a commodity, and you know, you could look at Edison way back when, and the idea was that it has to be commercially viable. So there's, you know, us in the ivory tower would be doing research for its own sake, but you know, even we folk would hope that it would have some impact on the world, right? But I think plenty of labs do work just for commercial viability. And large language models specifically, I mean, AI has been around exceptionally long, but large language models, you know, we toyed around with Da Vinci and examples of, or models before, you know, the big release of ChatGPT. So I don't think necessarily so. But what's interesting to me is that we have a technology here that commodifies language in a way. You know, it treats language. There's this great philosophical idea that what technology does is it allows us to see, and this is good and bad, or maybe perhaps neutral, but it allows us to see things as resources. All right, so we could look at a river as a life-giving, sacred thing, or we could see it through the technological lens as potential hydroelectric power. So you can see how it's a kind of a disenchantment, if you like. It could be a beautiful primeval forest that sustains all this life, or this is potential planks or something. And now we see that same thing for language. Language becomes almost reserve to train a model. But what can we do with that? Well, we can code all of a sudden, because there's a syntactic structure to code in whatever coding language, and we can really easily translate something into the style or into another language, from Farsi over into Mandarin without any effort. So I think that the commercial angle has always been very close to, if not upfront, but it is a special technology, yeah.
But I had a weird thought now. I was thinking, if I, as a completely layperson, think about AI, I love what AI can do for me in terms of saving time, fixing my grammar on a report. I look at companies and they this can ease up the mundane work, can read my 100 emails and tell me which one to do. But as a user, I don't know that as a general citizen, I don't know that I like so much that the company wants to use AI when I want their service. So it annoys me when I go onto a site and a bot answers me. It annoys me more to phone some call centers. But in general, I like more what AI can do in terms of decreasing my workload, opening up time for me, than me wanting to be the user of the company. I feel like I'm collateral damage if the company uses AI on me.
Why do you think that? Why do you feel like that?
I think it links to that trust thing that I don't know what they're going to do with what I type onto and what I ask the bot. I don't know what they're going to do with it.
And I think the business owner feels the same. He doesn't know if this model is going to talk to his customers in the way he would have liked as a human to have spoken to them.
But Rhys, wouldn't you say that that's probably your first challenge, is demonstrating benefit? Because people are using this. And I know some of my students that are in the commercial space are giving people software solutions with zero AI. They just use the word AI so that people would, now with added AI. So there's a little bit of sort of dark arts around it as well. But clearly, you're demonstrating value is probably battle number one. Okay, they have to trust you, of course, but there has to be the utility.
No, 100%. I think, and that's why I say, my background over 16 years helped me a lot, because all I was doing was, this is my spend and this is the value I'm deriving. Whether it was fuels per kilometers or kilometers driven, everything was, you have to show value. And in fact, when I first went in, I struggled to price. Because I was like, I can't charge you until I can show you the value. So I've come with that complete mindset. But kind of also having to learn, I have to charge 3 kids, you need to make money. So this is where I'm at, but I want to demonstrate value and trust. So kind of what I'm doing is, don't pay me for the first 30, 60 days until you see the value. But once you see it, then I'm billing you for what I did, And if you don't like it and you don't think it adds value, that's fine. And I have to take some losses. I mean, like I've said, if I sit with the right decision makers, I haven't had but I think the elephant example is so good, but I almost think it's more mysterious. It's almost like putting your hand in fog, because to your point, so many people don't understand. And even after a 6-month MIT course, I can't say I'm technically really not. I conceptually, as you speak, I'm like, okay, I remember that concept, but it is, the engineering is very deep, and then the layman person is just, what is going on? And then just start with the ML and the deep learning and then LLM, and most people are just like, whoa, But I think why business owners struggle is, one, is what they are exposed to, which mainly is Copilot and ChatGPT, and Claude Code is just a fundamentally different thing, even though people say, no, but look, Copilot's now using, the same model as Claude. And I even looked it up. Mercedes is coming first in the championship, and they're also coming 9th, but they both have the same engines. And it's what's the wrapper around it, and the fact that Claude Code is seeing your files, which can be very scary, that it's seeing all my files, but what then makes you know you. that much more like intimately. So when you ask it a question, it has the context, the memory of this is who this person is and this is what they're trying to achieve. But your question, coming back to it, monetizing, I think there's obviously this AI race, between the Chinese and the Americans. And what they were saying is the atom bomb, if you look at history, was, governments were funding these things. But now it's private companies. And, not to name and get into politics, but, one saying, no, it's all free and keep going. And then the next minute they're banning the model. And on the other hand, the Chinese are going, open source, there's models for everyone, but, who's behind it. So I think it's very interesting as a consumer to sit there knowing, okay, I'm going to pay the American models X, and then they won't train on me. Oh, but the Chinese are giving it for free, and I can download it. Yes, but you can't run it if you download it. And I think, again, it just comes to people who don't understand. So that 3% conversion for me is just because they don't understand what it can do for them. And they're also thinking that ChatGPT or Copilot is what AI is, or they're thinking an LLM is what AI. And it's actually this broader set of engineering that the more it advances, the more complex it gets in terms of what it, the way it can do things, but the easier it is for us to interact with it. And that's, for me, creating this mistrust that, it knows me so well. And I remember when I was first coding in January, vibe coding, not a coder. I was like, man, this model gets me. Like, I've had this idea of the solar thing for 3 years in my head, or 4 years, ever since when I bought the solar. And because I'm a value person, I spent X and I want Y back. And I want to accelerate the return on that. So if I can get it to turn my geyser and heat the water, I don't have to heat it and all that stuff. It's like, it gets me. It's getting the concepts. It gets me. You know what I mean? It was that deeply unsettling. I've been talking to a machine sometimes for 10, 12 hours a day, and it gets me and it unsettles me, because I know it's a machine. I'm doing the MIT course and learning these concepts of how it's doing that, and how, like the sufficiency, how it is trying to appease me because those people are trying to monetize. So if a model's always telling you you're wrong, even if you are wrong, no one's going to like something that always says you're wrong. So it's trained in a way to make you like it, which was Chat 4.0, which people loved, but it wasn't giving the right answer.
Yeah. Yeah. You read some notes?
Yeah. I'm also happy if you cut this. But as far as I'm concerned, there are no massive differences between the companies, the frontier companies, and their morals. I think there are lots and lots of challenges and things that we, as collective humanity, hasn't worked out yet. And I'm also a little. I'm aware of the fact that how the argument works. It's a sort of heads you lose, tail I win kind of idea. Whereas we say this is a technology and it's amazing. On the one hand, on the other side, this is technology and it's super scary if it's not us. So because they both feed into the same thing as you should invest and it should be us, whoever the us is. All that said, I mean, I agree with I disagree with maybe your position on the various companies. I think they're playing the same game with different strategies, and I think they probably have big personalities and lots of catfights among the CEOs, but actually the moral compass is not massively different. But this point about it gets me, I think is super interesting, because there we, in kind of complexity studies, you talk about a system that has lots of moving parts and it has path dependency and it has interaction with things outside and it has feedback loops and all of that. But the most important thing about a complex system is emergent properties, things that happen that you couldn't tell by just studying the individual parts. You put it all together and there's something more that comes out. And that, it gets me, feels emergent, right? They've just added more training and they've just added more compute. But all of a sudden there was this, somewhere along this kind of increment of improvement where it really now feels like it understands my instruction. It understands my desire. I think you folks talk about, theory of mind. It gets what I've got, the picture, which if you enjoy any form of technology, it really does spark joy, that moment. So it's disconcerting, yes, but it's also, wow, this is cool. And it gets it. So we've got this kind of tension between, it's an intimidating long game, and we would love that, the training was different and maybe on different data, and we would love everything to be, there are biases in the data, all those things. And we should talk about those problems. We can talk about the environmental costs and all of that. But, that is in tension with this moment where you say, well, this is really cool. It does something amazing. And I've had that same experience.
But what if I don't want it to know me? So if I sometimes said I just try to outsmart it, and I just lie to it and say random stuff, so it won't know me that well.
But then the results you get are not that good. So it's this, and that's when I sit with them and I explain, because one of the first things it does is a deep scan on your data, so to know you. But I explain what it's going to do. And I think business owners are not so much worried about it's going to know me. They're more thinking the spend is just trillions and billions and millions. But, if I'm not getting millions or billions or trillions back, it's a bad business decision, And that's why I start small with them and then scale them as they see the value of what they're doing. But they have to know that the first thing I'm going to do when I put it as part of the onboarding is it deep scans your data. And then it knows you. And then I think it's
assuming your data is you.
Well, I was telling you yesterday about there's some,
computer,
again, I won't name clients, but there's prominent people and the data's all over the place, and this is on this 2012 MacBook and this is on this 2017 this and this is on my phone, but I want AI, it's the first thing you got to do is clean the data, sync the data, make sure that the data is protected. You've got POPI Acts. If you're dealing with patients, there's all sorts of laws, and I think our laws are great in South Africa as long as they're implemented with the right ethics, if I can say it like that. I was at a Henley course a month ago, and I think once you start understanding the power of these and how to use them to train, even if you're not training the model itself, the weights and everything, but the training so that the output gives you what you're looking for. And then you look at the laws, they're still trying to understand what AI laws should be and what they shouldn't be. So I think this is, I can't remember when I was at varsity, but there was kind of the ethics as a group and there was the ethics as an individual. And I think as you scale and you train and people get there, I keep reminding them that you'll sit there and have to make a decision at some point. Because you're going to get to a point where you now know how the power of these models and how to implement them. But you probably might have data that you shouldn't have or you shouldn't use in this way to monetize, And it will become an individual ethical decision if you're going to use that to monetize, because you will feel it, and you will look at the law. And I think we disagree on the companies thing, which is fine. And again, I hope Dario is not the pro cricket team, but he said, he spoke about research, he spoke about that, but eventually said he doesn't trust the leader. And that for me as I spoke is trust is the number one thing. And, and it shows up in business with what happened with the Department of War. Where Anthropic said we have two things we will not do. And one is mass surveillance on our individuals, and the other one is hit a button and there's no human in the loop. And that's something else I'll train you. It doesn't matter. When you send the stuff out, it has your name on. You can't say, no, Claude did this or Copilot did this. It's your name. It's your name on this piece of work or whatever you're putting out. So they say human in the loop, human in control or command is, I think, the marketing term. And he said, we won't do it. And OpenAI came and said, no, we'll take that contract. And that weekend, I think, the most downloaded app over the weekend was Claude, and the most deleted app was on OpenAI. And that's for me, when I go and see a client, what you're trying to do with the trust, And I think as South Africans, we're in a very unique positions for two reasons. I think one, our ingenuity around make a plan. You know, if you don't make a plan, you know, there's no fallback.
Yes.
You know, you have to make a plan, you got to get going, and you look at the personalities, a lot of these top AI and even individuals in the world are South Africans. And the way you use these models is, you know, like you once you gets to know you and you start writing skills, which is essentially just a list of instructions, and you put these instructions together, it's amazing what it can do. And the other one is, well, we have access to the American models and the Chinese don't have access to the Americans, and the American model don't have access to the Chinese. So we sit here being able to see both sides with this ingenuity. And I think there's an incredible opportunity, but Doro is worried that, you know, the economy globally grows by 7%, but Silicon Valley grows about 700%. And there's places that feel no impact of this massive economic potential boom, you know.
While you were talking about business and customers, my experience has been, and I don't know if you can technically elaborate on it, but when businesses get their teams to start using it, my old boss at Outsurance, Aaron Schuis, he was actually a real scientist, and I told you earlier, when we used to sit in OpsCo and ExCo meetings to present our reports for the month, one of the things I loved him saying is your ink to data ratio is too high. You're using too much ink to explain yourself. And it seems like it's over-explaining itself, it's giving too much read work, too much. If I ask it a simple question, I just want a simple line, but it's giving me 2 pages of stuff to read. Why is that happening? Martin, why is it so over-explanative? And why is it taking... Because what I'm trying to get to is, if customers implement this to save time, but it's producing so much content that the people need to consume it, to act on it, to service a customer or, you know, something. Why is it producing
Okay, yeah, sure. I wanted to talk about collective action problems and AI in the military, but I'm happy to go here. I also had a nice joke about a gulag, but it's a good joke. No, let's talk about this instead, or maybe we can circle back a bit later. Okay, so you could tell 2 ways. I can have the sentence, the cat sat in the mat, and give that to a large language model and say, start there and go on. And it would just, what is the next word? Because it's predicting the word after that, and it would write some story about the cat sitting on the mat. So that's one way that it could do. The other mode, if you like, is to say, I'm giving you the cat sat in the mat. Your first word must be the, and the last one must be mat. But I need 20 words in there. So it kind of bloats it for you. Now, if you think about students, you know, when you give them a question, they do quite a lot of those filler text, you know, the old chorrel, you know. The reason why this is so significant is because this, you know, all that nonsense. So that's, what is it, ink to
data ratio.
Okay, so that's signal to noise ratio, right? Yeah. Tufte, the great guru of kind of visual education, spoke about data to ink ratio as well. So it does that. And the training that is given to this model, so the reinforcement learning through human feedback, reveals that that's what we want. So you don't want a laconic yes. You want, this is a genuinely novel idea. With a little summary of what about this is probably, novel or is going to sound novel to you. Yeah. Would you like me to elaborate or something like that? So a part of that is kind of attention capturing, and a part of that is to keep you on the thing so that you give it the next prompt for the next thing. But mostly it's what we ask it to do, or better put, it's like a human preference that we don't just get the laconic line. And that leads us to the whole field of AI slop as well, which is just the filler text. There's no substance, right? And obviously we see that as well in the information comments.
But it's interesting because if I'm going to prompt it to give me a speech for my grade 2 child, yes. I don't want it to say, that's wonderful, you're being a great mother, writing your speech on AI. But
which it will do.
But if I am asking it, my boss was really mean to me today, I don't know how to handle the meeting coming up, then I wanted to do all the filler text and be validating. And
Sure.
so it's like, it's a human preference in all of the, I can almost say like wrong ways. Like if we were in business, we wanted to go quick. But if we wanted to validate us, we enjoy that.
Yeah, 100%. But that is a learned behavior. It's reinforced. So you can, that's a pattern. And if it's a human pattern, that can be transposed into an algorithm, right? So if 95% of humans are likely to be have a desire to be comforted if they say this was tough, then it trots that out regularly. And if you're an exception, then it can pick that up as well. And maybe back to your point about what if I don't want to be known? The idea of a collective action problem is if this is a pool and there's some fish in there, and if I fish my daily fish and you do one and you do one and you do one, and there's enough for tomorrow and the day after, and the fish will spawn again and all of that. Okay, but what if I want to fish 5 fish? If I want to cheat, if I want to shirk it, then I mess it up for everyone, right? So in the absence of a third party that says you are only allowed a fishing quota or something like that, there's an incentive for me to cheat, right? Okay, so that's a collective action problem because I affect all of us. So we have to all play by the rules. And privacy, or privacy if you insist, is like that. You know, we have now had some interaction, so you have information on me and vice versa. So if all of you keep your lives private, but I reveal everything to AI, AI knows about you as well. So in other words, as a human collective, we haven't figured this thing out because privacy is sort of compromised. If your idea was, you know, I want to unplug, I'm not part of the matrix, is we will be known. And that's, you know, it does bring up a whole bunch of issues here, and I'm not here, you know, saying, okay, well, here are the solutions, you know, in my back pocket. But it is something we have to confront. Is my privacy is also a function of your privacy, etc.
Yeah.
It's like a Mr. Beast game show. You don't know who's going to go for the money and
You've lost me with that reference.
So I want to go a little bit practical again. So in the specifically South African context, with our unemployment fact or reality, knowing what you know, what you've seen so far, what we said earlier is I don't want to talk about it, that's going to take everybody's jobs, but can it create jobs better than the political parties? Can it actually do that? Because that's what we wanted to do. If it's such a powerful product or technology, how can our listeners use it in a way that actually grows the economy and really adds value to the individual?
I think the best example is the radiology. So radiology was decided, and correct me if my facts are wrong here, but it was like, no, AI is going to be able to do radiology because it'll be able to see the images, and now even from the images, it can tell your ancestry, you know, because it's just so much training data. It's seen all these things. It learns who the patient is, and, you know, you're not going to need, we don't need radiologists anymore, so people stop studying radiology. And what's there a shortage of now of? Radiology. Why? I'll give my example. I went for an MRI and couple, and you know, I've got something in my back, and the decision is surgery or try and do physio, bio, etc. to try and recover. Even if the AI gives me the factually correct answer of surgery on my back or recovery, I don't want to have this conversation with a machine. I want to have this with a human that can
Can know you.
People talk about know, but the AI will know you, but it cannot feel you. It cannot feel the emotions on your face, okay, in a way that is a human thing. And, you know, so I'm now doing the non-surgical route first because I trust the person that is now becoming a client because we had a conversation, a human conversation, over voice notes, etc. But And it's amazing that now I was like, oh, no, radiology, you don't go study that. And now we have a shortage. So for me, it's not going to replace jobs. I think if you just look at history, I love history, but I'm a businessman. But I always love history. And why? Because I think it can often tell you what's happening in the future just by looking at the past. So I was showing you the graph across history, you know, when they invented the printing press in the 1400s, I don't know, all scribes, the loss of jobs, created one of the biggest literacy booms, and therefore came out of the Middle Ages, and you just repeat steam engine, I know, muscle power, and then industrial revolution, you know. So all of these things, jobs are going to change fundamentally, and I think the fear is because people don't understand the technology a lot. As I said, the exposure to it is very limited in either, you know, one or two ways, and they know there's going to be change. You know, when you work with this technology and it is so revolutionary, I think people know things are going to change. But what does a human fear the most? Unknown, right? And that unknown, I think, is what's unsettling people. And it's that unknown that when I sit with the client that I try and at least give them some sort of grounding. So I start with the history of AI, that it's 75 years old, from the 50s, British scientist. The first chatbot was 1966. There's nothing new. What's changed a lot is that it needs compute, the big blob, as Dario talks, right? And the data, the digitalization of all our lives. You know, like when I'm trying to take on clients now, yes, the data's all over, but it's there. You know, as long as I can get it in, it will know them, but it doesn't feel them, if I can say it like that. But to get the value you need, it's, you know, the training, and again, I'm not the most technical, but it has the new model from Anthropic's 10 trillion parameters, so 10 trillion weights. And I think the simple way I describe it is as it goes through, you know, the different levels, which is, you know, off our human brain, we try to replicate it. When you touch something, it's hot, cold, and one of those hot's fire, one of the cold's fire. And that's doing the same thing. And the hallucination is just, it thinks that's the most correct answer, you know. But when you give it all your data and you point it, and you're literally writing, you know, I wrote SOPs in warehouses and for truck drivers, that's all you feel like I'm doing now is that, but the LLM writes them, but I have like a constitution, and one of the things is banned words, which is the slop. You know, you may not say this. It still says it. And that's where it starts feeling like a human, because I'm like, it is not a human. It is a machine.
Yes.
But the best way you can think about working with it is if you had a new employee, you would give it your SOPs, you know, and that's, you know, your data. This is how we work. This is what we do. This is what I want you to do. This is what I don't want you to do. So every time you prompt it, and that's one of the advantages I think of Claude, is has the Claude.md, which is it's every single prompt gets this and who it is and where's my data and what I want you to do and what I don't want you to do. So a lot of things when I go into business is you connect your Gmail. If you don't connect it. But if there is business, but try and separate it.
But I want to
Yeah.
challenge you, Martin, and I want to try and keep this, because in my mind, the businesses need, and the people who listen to the show need growth. They need rands going up and rands costs going down. Practically, for the typical business in South Africa, who's got a little CRM or a CRM and an ERP and staff running around trying to service customers and or sell products, where do they go? What do they do for us to grow this economy?
Okay, but let's get back to the analogy of the vehicle, right? So are we talking about a canoe, or are we talking about a dinky little bicycle?
Yeah.
So when you're talking about radiology, you're not talking about LLMs. That's machine learning. And I think that the truth is, and I know the radiology is almost an example in the other direction, because it's saying, you know, there was a lot of kind of spooky talk, you know, this is terrible, this is going to take your jobs, and okay, it hasn't materialized. But I think that with the expansion of machine learning, that's where the joy lies, that's where the value lies. So that is the farmer who can get a drone overhead to do a soil analysis or a count of livestock, because that's a machine learning algorithm. That's digital pathology, where we take slides, scanned slides of biopsy tissue, and instead of a human pathologist going through that slowly, we do that at speed. Now, the pathologists are still there and safe, and we have way too few pathologists, and it's an industry it's a service under massive pressure in the country. So, and on the continent as well, of course, the rest of the continent. So, the more the better. I think there's a lot of that. From where I sit, and of course I'm not in the commercial field, I do not see yet massive wins coming with the use of large language models. Maybe that'll come, I don't know, but I don't see that. Traditionally, we used to say that automation ought to take away three things: jobs that are dirty, dull, or dangerous. Right, so if you can give me a bot that can go down in the mines and that you don't have humans in there, I think that's probably a good thing. Okay, now there is a question but what about the miners' jobs? Happy to talk about that, but that's not a great job. That's a job that you do because you can't do anything else, or that's not what somebody aspires necessarily to do, and that's not disrespecting the job or the person. It's saying, can we not find something better? Okay, where are the solutions? Well, the first solutions, if we're going to talk big picture, is just fix education in the country. Our education system is terrible. And we can talk all these highfalutin, beautiful ideas in automation, but if we don't fix education, we're fixing nothing. So let's think about a pyramid. There's, let's call it AI literacy. Below that, there's digital literacy. But below that, there's just bog standard literacy. We haven't got that yet. So I'm happy to listen to people talk about the need for reindustrialization in the country, and maybe we should need tariff barriers or all of that. I'm game for those debates, but we don't fix education, none of this happens. Do we implement? And that's what I think someone like Rhys is looking at is, what can we automate, and what if this is a prediction problem? What if this is a pattern that I can help you see in your data, that a human, it's the dull of the dirty, dull, and dangerous. Yeah. That yes, a human can do it, but it would take them this amount of time. I can automate that for you. There's value in there because there's a saving. In the sort of jiggery-pokery of the magic of just LLMs as such, I think it's a moot point.
But maybe, like you say, some of the value is, I don't have to spend 5 hours doing this, so I might not make more money, but I get to go play some golf.
But do people do that? Because that's interesting. I look at my own life where I use it. For instance, normally, if I had to do discovery with a team, discovery still needs to happen. That's an hour or two, whatever the case might be. I then had to go back and type out a proposal. I had a template or something, but it still had to. Now I take a transcript of that call. Based on the skills that I've got in Claude, it creates a very, very good proposal that I just quickly scan through to make sure it's done. And it's probably overwriting stuff I probably wouldn't have written. And the customer's receiving that, probably taking my proposal into his LLM, asking, is this a good price and a quote? I'm just wondering practically if somebody would be able to start the dull stuff. The typical business of South Africa is a services business. Unfortunately, I'm making a manufacturing product. It's not growing that fast. So most are service-orientated businesses. Where do you see it happening?
I think
you said CEO and finance, no?
Yeah. I hired implement, but I think the two important points here for me is education and automation. And I was talking to a customer, and business is growing, and a lot of what I'm doing is just training, right? Just making people understand what they need to understand about the technology to add value in their business, And it's not me coming with a product, which is also, I was saying to you earlier, why it's difficult to sell, because I don't have buy this and this is what it can do for you. I will make you understand the technology, and yes, it comes with a license and everything, but I'll make you understand the technology because I don't know your data. I don't know your business. I don't know where it's going to add value, I was saying with one figure, and eventually said, okay, no, Rhys, I'll give you the 2 days, because I said, just give me 2 days, and after 2 days, generally you would have got it, and then we'll have a commercial discussion. And he said, I feel like, I don't understand it, but my mom, she's 88 years old, and I just keep telling her, just use the banking app. because then you won't have to keep going in. And I said, it's exactly like that. Like, just use it, but use it in the way that I'll teach you. So actually a lot of what I'm doing in a way is just training people, not taking MIT and all of that, just how as a business person, what I've taken, what you need to understand so that you can use the models, tools in a way that will add value. And the second thing about employment is, I was even saying, now I'm bringing in people, obviously hiring people, and they're like, Rhys, one of the reasons I brought you in was so I can grow but not have to keep employing so many people, and now you're employing people. So there's this paradox now, but I thought I was going to take all the jobs, but now Rhys is starting to employ people.
Yes.
And one of the best implementations, they say, of AI in a company was JP Morgan, and they hired 3,000 software engineers. And if you listen, all product is gone in software, and software engineers are being gone. I think you're going to need more of them, just like the radiologists. And you talk about, pathology and things. Well, all the grunt work or dirty work is going to be done, but you'll need that human connection. And you'll need someone to understand what the technology has done to a person who understands their business so that they can connect these two. And I feel like a lot of that is just what I'm doing, because I come from business, but I did a very brief course, but I have a brother who's very deep into it.
Yeah.
And so we have these conversations, and there's trying to take that layman's term to a person, But I have a one-pager that says AI does not equal automation.
Yes.
Because people think I'm going to go to it, click a button, and it's going to do my work. I've never worked harder. And, I worked for corporate for 16 years, and I have never worked harder. And they're calling it AI brain fry because of how much it generates, and because I'm having to learn to completely change. But I don't have to build presentations anymore. I don't have to I have to check it. But I have skills. You talk about skills. One is to grill me. So it fills in the gaps of the data. Anything it's not sure of, it grills me. And, Matt Pocock designed the skill, but I've kind of adapted it from development into business. And then another one is roast AI. So kind of, it's amazing. And again, I'm not technically too inclined, but if an LLM kind of knows it's going to be marked at the end, we often see it behave differently if it just knows, give me an answer quick. It as it goes through. And what's even amazing, I have a skill that it checks it with other models. And now that it knows that its competitor is going to check it, it's just that much more robust in terms of it doing its own checks before it hands you the output, because it knows that its output is going to be marked. And that's where, again, I don't technically know, but it's kind of the same with us. If we know we're going to be marked on something we're going to do, we generally put more effort into it. We think about it deeper. If we I'm just going to hand this piece of paper, and it'll just be a one-on-one, so you will see it. And then, if you don't have a problem, you can tell me you don't have a problem. But if you know, I'm going to give this to a board, and the board's going to mark it and come back to me. And that's where these models get fascinating in one way, and really good output for business owners, because now you have something that adds value. But on the philosophical side or human side, like, why are these models behaving differently? But I think it's, and again, to the experts, but because we modeled them on ourselves, right? We modeled them on our data, so they behave like we taught them.
Yeah.
Would you say that part of the trick for someone in your position is that you almost have to go against the marketing? What I mean is that the tech companies are promising us magic. They're saying, this is going to revolutionize all of that. And when you're at the coalface, what you actually want to tell is no. So because are we seeing that the South African economy is growing? No. Are we seeing that the global economy is, even at the level of population growth? No. Are we seeing that the global, and if we take out the investment in AI, are we seeing productivity in the world go up? No. Okay. Are we seeing that coders have more free time? No, quite the contrary. So it's almost the opposite. So where it works is in not the rule, but in the exception, and it's where you have measured, careful implementation. It's where people don't buy the myth of, just add AI and it's good, because that's nonsense. So it's almost as if those that buy in are those that are not, listening to the marketing noise and go, okay, well, I've got a very specific problem and I understand this problem fundamentally. And there's a part of this that is pattern recognition. Can we bring in more efficiencies And someone like you then evaluates that and says, yes, you can, or, no, sorry, pass, or yes, you can, and you build this thing, and then that works. So there's a kind of a robust engagement. But it feels like an interesting tension, because it's not that kind of walking on the street and going, line up, I'm going to give you AI, and it's going to go, because we know that's just not true.
Listen, we need to start landing the plane. I'm busy reading Bono's book, The Stories of Surrender, one from U2. And he says that when they started the band, they said, we can't change the world, but we can change the world in us. Now, as an older man, knowing his history, he's saying, I've learned that I can change the world, but I can't change the world in me. And I'm wondering with this technology, what we can change with it, and can it change the world in us? Should it? And will it really change? And I think Martin too, and that's what you mentioned, it's not really changing the world as much as we hoping for it, or is it? And maybe that's just the last piece, that 5 minutes that we can Carien.
I think the one thing is timeline, and Bono's a great example, because at one point in life he said this and another. And, there's that, I don't know who it was, but one of the MIT, I think, professors, predicts, I think, 12 ways that it will end with AI. But that could be 100 years, 150, 200. Some of them are disastrous, some of them are utopia. But I think when we talk business, for me, as a brand new startup, it's getting cash flow in the next 3, 6, 12 months to get through the 2-year failure rate of most businesses. So I think timeline is often when people are answering things like, are you talking now?
Yes.
Or are you talking 5 years time? Or are you talking 10 years time? So I often think, Elon Musk has a thing that we should just pay a social wage, but I feel like he's always thinking, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years.
Yes.
When I'm talking about the examples I have is like now.
Yes.
I'm thinking now, how do I add value now? And for me, it's actually, I don't build the product, they building the product. And that's where I think the fear is also coming with software companies. Oh, but now the companies can build, yes, but they can vibe code, they can build, even the solar app is running my house and another one. I need my brother and a software engineer to make sure it's safe, to put it into production. That's not something a vibe coder can do. But, it was interesting you're saying, no, the customer may saw the patterns. The customer doesn't see the patterns, but if you feed the AI its data, the AI sees the patterns in their business and tells them. So the use case was really good. It was an importer who sells, we said the service, right? So they're importing products and then distributing it, and something I did in my previous roles. And, you order now, it arrives in 3 months, and then it takes 3 to 6 months to sell. And that's just great because it's forecasting, right? And I said to him, kept saying to him, no, please, you need to use it. And eventually, I'll do it for free, and then, you pay me back, whatever it is. And now he's sitting with it and telling him, don't buy the yellow shoes. So it wasn't, even though I could kind of understand his business and saying it's really good at this kind of thing where it can predict for you and it will see things you can't see. He doesn't see it, but he sees the value because now he sees an inventory. It tells him you have 500,000 Rand worth of yellow shoes that you haven't unsold. So definitely don't order yellow shoes.
Yes.
And for him, he never made a connection with color, with rugby or hockey shoes. That connection or pattern wasn't there for him, but the money is. And
Interesting.
I think that's when it's going to be really difficult to measure the economic growth of AI. And it's something when you go and I'm saying, well, you spend X with me, you should get X plus more, because then, it's the way I'm inside a business, it's a justification. Yeah. But even with clients I've been 6 or 7 months, they're like, well, I can't live without it now because I'm making all my decisions with me. It's doing all my PowerPoints. It's doing all the grunt work. So I can't put a value to it, but I can't work without this tool. And I think email would be the same, right? If you just go back to the old technology, cell phones, what is the cell phone worth to you? What is the email worth to you? Can't really put a value. Okay, take it away. No, you can't take that away.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's going to be difficult. And I also think, like, for me, I'm very much, I need to solve my business. I need to make sure it's cash flow. Like, I'd love to solve South Africa's unemployment, but I think I'll do that maybe when I'm Bono's age and have Bono's money, and give back to society. But right now, it's more like, but again, ethically, I want to make sure that when I do that, I'm not disadvantaging someone or, so it's like, okay, I want to do this, but I need to do it ethically. But yeah, I must say, if I start thinking about how to solve South Africans' problems, I don't think I'd get to my business.
No.
And my kids wouldn't,
Yeah. But yeah, I agree.
And I think just to end, I watch Rory Sutherland, and he's a great marketer, and he said that, what the problem with our business is we're making so efficient on things that people want. So you have the feedback and everything. What we've lost is educating or showing people things that they don't know about that they actually want. And that, I think, is when you sit with a client, one, they don't know what they want because they don't know the technology, and you have to kind of show them to it. But I also think as we go through it, about changing your world, we need to think, what do I actually want? And it's very difficult when you look at the neural network. You've got the inputs and outputs. We all think step one, step two, especially businessmen. Do this, do that, do that. What do you want? And it's not just about money, right? It's about, can I get more time back? Can I spend more time with my kids? And I was like, hey, what do you want? And you're like,
I don't know.
I don't know, right? And it's this hard question. It's like, okay, I know I want these three things, but what do you want for your kids? What do you want for your future in 3 years in your marriage? It's quite intimidating to have to write down everything you want because you don't know. So I think this technology is making people think, hopefully, about what do they really want. Yes. As soon as you give it a goal, it will start recognizing patterns of from other people, as you said, the collective, to how to get to that goal. But you have to, in your mind, define it.
Anything you guys want to think you should have added to this conversation that difficult to wrap all of this into one conversation?
Your last point. Yeah, I agree with the idea of thinking beyond just what clients want. There's maybe apocryphal. I don't know if is it Ford that said if they asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse or something that idea. Exactly. But okay, you were talking about the world outside and the world within. I think that. I don't think I think it's a red herring to say, will it change the world? If we're talking about AI writ large or, machine learning or large language models, I think we have to accept that it is. And there's opportunity in there, and there are challenges in there, immediately and long term. And I think the trick is to keep your eye on both. So yes, we need a good national policy and we need good regulation, and we need entrepreneurs to say, okay, now I've got new tools. What can I fix with these new tools and be creative around that? So we need all of that and have vision. But we also need to say, what about water, and what about electricity, and what about education, and what about inequality and poor governance? Because it's messy and it's unsexy and it's really intimidating. But we need people to not say the answer is we're going to wait until AI comes and we'll throw AI at that, because that's nonsense. We have to be actively fighting on those fronts, and saying, well, there are real problems right now, and real harms right now that we should be solving. And it's that ability to look at the immediate and be honest, and look at the long term, and hopefully work on solutions.
I wish we could have taken more hours on this. We might circle back to this in future. But thank you for your inputs. I'm always happy that we don't have to have a specific result, like you say. Just creating awareness of people who's listening to this. And really appreciate your time. Thank you.